Okay, so we're back. We're going to just talk a little bit about how conflict resolution and our learning in the academic setting has really helped us as people, and really navigate our own conflicts, because that's really, I think, I don't know if Alana you would agree, but a lot of people get into conflict resolution because they are hoping to help themselves in some way, right? Like helping their own relationships. I know I for sure. I was a young mom, well, young-ish mom, okay, not young, but youngish mom with two young children, and I got into conflict resolution, like I got into the program because I was interested in helping navigate my own life at home. Right. So it really, and then that just really grew. So how about for you? How did that come about?
Yeah, it was more at the time I was struggling with what career do I choose, and so when the advisor said, I think you should try this, I said, why? And they said, you'll know when you go in. And it was the first class. I was maybe 10 minutes into the class, and I was like, this whole textbook makes sense. And I just started crying because I was like, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. And I don't know why. Mm-hmm. But I just knew that the language fit and some of the diagrams and things they were explaining and tools. And I was like, this is stuff I've been learning my whole life, and I want to learn more, and I want to learn how this can help me, but also maybe this is a career path. And at the time, conflict resolution was still quite modern and a little bit more rare. People weren't running off to take it. So I also thought that was interesting, as John Dirksen had said that, in 10 or 15 years, he said people will know about it and they'll be a little more alert to it. So they'll say, oh, it's neat that you have that, but they still won't know what it is. And he was not wrong.
Yeah.
But it's kind of neat because it's just, I don't know, it's a little bit like social work in a sense of I'm there to be there for people and I'm there to listen to your story, but I'm going to help you with your story and help you kind of carve out your own plan versus what social workers do.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think you were saying earlier too that it really helped you, like in your own personal life, know that if you need help, there's no shame in getting help.
Yeah, and I think that, in hindsight, when I think about the year that I went into it, I was going through a lot of personal things that I wasn't even recognizing the signs of. And so because of some of the learning and the approach from the profs to us as people and students, I was able to start putting the building blocks together in my head of, oh, I might actually need some help here. And it didn't even occur to me to have shame about it. I just knew I need help. There's professionals. Let's get someone to talk to, and they might be able to help me work through this because I don't see what the problem is, but I can tell there is a problem.
Right.
And so it's something now in professional life that I do share with my staff is that something you can articulate to clients if they're struggling, or in your own world if you know someone who's struggling. The joke is always, do you do your own dentistry? And everyone laughs at me when I say that, but the reality is no one's probably doing that. And so usually one in the bunch will say, well, why does that matter? I said, well, if you're not doing your own dentistry, how would you do your own brain for, more of a kind of, black and white example, but how would you go in there and tinker if you're not sure what you're tinkering with and you don't know how to tinker? So when you go and meet someone, even if it's one session, someone will give you some kind of a tool or some kind of language that will spur on another thought, and it will get you thinking. And I don't know, I think that's really valuable that people understand that there's different types of professionals that are interested in helping with emotions or literal thought process, or psychiatry, psychology, counseling, life coach. There's all different approaches to your internal conflict that they can help you guide yourself through a process or give you the help that you may need, depending. But once you have that, then you're so much more balanced and able to go and do the conflict resolution with other people, or problem solving, or whatever you'd like to call it. And you're a little bit more aware of what's happening around you, and probably quicker to recognize things that could be affecting you or a group or a dynamic in your personal life. So.
I would have to say that's the thing that I also had a similar experience. So the greatest lesson that conflict has taught me is that we all experience it, which kind of sounds strange, but I think I went into it thinking, I don't have this type of conflict, or I don't have that kind of conflict, or conflict is this like big, massive thing that only certain people deal with. And then you realize, no, we're all kind of in the boat together. Right? It might look differently for everybody, but we all have conflict in our lives, and that's nothing to be ashamed about. And it's actually something that can be a good thing. I remember the first class I learned that conflict is neither good nor bad.
Yeah.
I had always grown up thinking conflict was bad.
Yeah.
That was just part of my family history of, you stay away from conflict, or conflict can maybe have some detrimental impacts.
Yes.
So it's something that you don't really want in your life. And then realizing, it can actually be very productive and can have some really positive impacts along with the negative, but it can really have some positive, as long as, like you were mentioning, the approach is that we're willing to learn, that we're willing to grow, that we're willing to move outside of what we think we know, and say, hey, maybe there's a different approach here. Yeah.
I think being able to kind of, there's a celebrity quote that I'm just recently familiar with, but I loved it. They said you have to be willing to walk through the fire, and then you'll come out stronger on the other side. So if you're able to kind of understand that I'm going to maybe have to go through a process here and learn it myself, and this might be uncomfortable, but by the end of it you'll have some kind of skill that you didn't have before, and able to approach the next thing. And I really think that's something invaluable that people can learn about themselves and approach. And one thing you were saying, that the avoidance of conflict, I think, it's an action, but it's also, there's different types of conflict styles, and that was one thing that we learned in school. Which is something you wouldn't know that. But once we had that kind of broken down, I have applied that in everywhere in my life, so that when I'm speaking to somebody and I can see, because I've studied it, I can see, oh, you have a forceful conflict style, I am a collaborator. That's why we're not communicating. It's not that you're right or wrong, or I'm right or wrong. It's that we're not speaking the same language.
Yes.
And that's something I also teach when I'm doing my training as a professional, is I'll say, if you're speaking French and I'm speaking Spanish, and we're having an argument about who's going to vacuum, you're not going to understand each other, but you're having the same problem. So it's learning how to communicate with each other, and again, learning yourself and understanding what your style is, so that you can present and hopefully help the other person understand where you're coming from with the other party.
And like you said, and learning that each style can be actually good depending on the circumstance.
It is,
So sometimes, avoidance is necessary to get out of a situation that may be escalating very quickly. But then collaboration is great when you want to build a relationship with someone and you want to have that time that it takes. Collaboration takes time, but it's a great way of building those relationships. The trust factor, all of those things. So that's such a great. I like how you use the language, how you're speaking a different language when you're using different styles. So that's so key.
Yeah, that's something just helps me remember, because if I'm getting flustered and I'm like, oh, this person's upset and now I'm upset, and you can tell there's a conflict, that helps me break it down. They're speaking French, I'm speaking Spanish. That's what the problem is. And again, just breaking it down to bare bones before we even worry about the actual problem of, we need to be able to talk, or we're not going to be able to make this work.
And let's get on the same frequency, right?
Exactly,
let's try and at least start speaking somewhat of the same language, so we can understand each other a little bit better. That's a good reminder. And then you also mentioned the thing about the fire, going through the fire, and it's so interesting because my logo, which I just did a redesign recently, so it's on my mind, is of a diamond, and it's for that reason. One of the reasons is because a diamond is put under immense pressure. And that's what makes it beautiful, is then it comes out a diamond from the refining fire, right? And that's what I see conflict often is it can turn our lives into beautiful things if we're willing to listen to what it has to teach us and learn from it. So
absolutely.
Well, thank you very much for coming and doing this interview with me. This is a whole new thing for us, but it's been great, and I'm so glad you're here. Thanks.
Appreciate it.
There. It's flashing, but it stopped.
Good. Thanks.
So I think it was almost